he never used the name Traven, always called Croves Hal.
Hal, all the time.
Did you ever hear anyone call him anything but Mr. Croves or Hal?
No, nobody, because probably sometimes people that they want to find out if he was Traven, probably they say Mr. Traven. But in that moment, he was a very good actor, you see, and he pretended that he didn't hear it. So he kept with the same dog expression, and nothing happens.
Publisher Lawrence Hill thought he was meeting Traven, but...
Well, that's the interesting thing, you see. He held out his hand, and he said, Croves.
Perhaps Crove's refusal to agree that he was Traven is explained in the simplest way, that he wasn't. But this remained to be resolved. What sort of a man was Croves?
For the last 16 years of his life, the man called Hal Croves lived, for the most part, in Mexico City. First at the Calle Durango, at number 333, and later in the Calle Rio, Mississippi, close to the center of the town, in this house, here, number 61. His companion throughout was Rosa Elena Lujan, his agent and translator, and the wife he married in 1957.
Mrs. Lujan had met Croves years before, had translated the Traven books, and the B. Traven copyright was and is in her name.
She turned everything over to me when we got married. Of course, the copyrights and all these things were already in my name. And he says, there's all the money, and from now on you manage the money. If you spend it all in a day, I don't care. We starve, I don't care. It's your responsibility.
Crove's stepdaughter, Malou.
And he had a hearing problem, as you may know, so he used a hearing aid. And when we started discussing and arguing and all that, he said, well, I can't discuss against 3 women, you know. So when he was tired, he just said, I'm absolutely fed up of this discussion, and he would turn the hearing aid off. And there we were yelling, turn it on, turn it on.
Reticent, rarely opened his mouth, in fact. I'd consult him occasionally, and I grew to consult him less and less because only rarely did he have an observation even to make.
This fragment of home movie is the only live record of Croves. He's wearing glasses. A quiet, meek, small man, it seems. A character at odds with the hectoring, even bullying persona of the man who typed the name B. Traven at the end of his lengthy letters. Whoever he was who signed himself BT, he was a know-all. Paul Kona is married to Lupita, the Mexican film star. BT was an obsessive fan of Lupita's, wrote scripts for her, sent letters suggesting parts, even offering himself as a drama coach. Such was Traven's infatuation that for once it looked as though he were going to reveal himself.
He sent her a note by a little Mexican boy, a native boy, to meet him at a certain place on the beach, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe. It was already rather late, and this was a very remote beach than Acapulco, and don't forget, in those days, Acapulco wasn't the city that it's today. And the friends with whom Lupi was staying in Acapulco said, listen, we will not let you go there alone. We will go in the car, then you can go down to the beach and meet the man, and we will wait for you because we are a little worried. This beach is dangerous. And so it happened, and he didn't show up. She waited for half an hour. She saw somebody sitting somewhere nearby, but she, of course, didn't do anything about it. The man didn't come. So she went back home. Next day came a very, very annoyed letter from Traven. Insulted. You brought bodyguards to the meeting. Well, it's very obvious that he was there, or he wouldn't have been able to write this letter. Don't you trust me? What is the matter with you? And so on and so on.
My private life would not let my readers down, but it is my affair, and I want to keep it that way.
Hal Croves was also secretive.
I really could never ask questions. Whenever he wanted to talk, it was wonderful, fine. Then I would listen, because if I asked questions, then he would say, oh, stop crying.
And of course, he had a sixth sense in public when cameras were about.
I am not even of German race or blood, but German publishers knew from the first day of our relations that I am an American, born in the USA.
Thus wrote Traven. What nationality was the man Croves, who was also the man Torsven? His passport has him as a Mexican citizen, but he became a Mexican only in 1951, and before then his papers identified him as American. Certainly a clue to his nationality would be the way in which he spoke English, but here, as throughout, the evidence is conflicting. Judy Stone wrote a book, The Mystery of B. Traven, and met Hal Croves.
When he first came into the room the first day I met him, I was struck by his English, which was accented, and it seemed to be a German accent, or at least I speculated that it was a German accent.
From the inflection of his voice and the way he sometimes constructed sentences, it sounded foreign. It could have been a Scandinavian, could have been a German.
Yes, it didn't strike me as being a German accent.
I am in a mess, not exactly in a mess. I need an answer which perhaps you can give me.
The only known imprint of Crove's voice is an amateur recording we found, taken by his stepdaughter.
Would you give me permission to illustrate the book?
Well, one day he was typing in German, and I said, but darling, you told me that you didn't know any German. You're typing in German. And he turned and said, I don't know any German. So that was that.
Traven sent out many of his manuscripts in English, but the English was peculiar. Bernard Smith remembers getting the manuscript of The Death Ship.
It was written, I surmised, as a direct, word-for-word, literal translation from the German language, because the sentence structure, the paragraph structure, and so on, was really German. Whereupon I rewrote the first, I'd say 20 or 25 pages of The Death Ship, sent them to him, and back came a letter from him to me saying he was enormously enthusiastic and I had a free hand to do anything I wanted. Whereupon I rewrote the whole book. I don't want anyone to misunderstand what the nature of the rewrite was. It was not any literary contribution for me. That is to say, I didn't add anything to his narrative or to his characterizations. I merely put his literal translation from the German into acceptable English.
The first manuscripts published in Germany were written in German, but the German too is odd. Robert Goss is a student of the language and of Traven's writing.
I myself took a passage of 40 pages and I found over 200 barbarisms of style, and on the average of once every second page, a glaring error in simple German grammar.
Odd English, odd German. Was Croves Traven? Some of the witnesses have no doubt. Paul Kohner.
He knew very well, as far as I am concerned at least, the game was up. He knew that I had accused him in that unfortunate last letter that I sent to him, that he, had invented this figure of Croves, and he mustn't play that game with me, because he didn't have to. Anyhow, I assure you, it was Traven, and Traven was Croves. There's no doubt about that.
And Croves' widow, perhaps naturally, has no doubts.
When my husband was adapting a book by Traven, making a script, a film script, which he would later sign Croves, we used to work to be in complete silence and undisturbed, to work in a hotel room, let's say. And he didn't even take the book to work from, for the script. He knew all the books by memory.
The man who was Croves can be traced in Mexico from 1925. The following year, he took part in a government expedition to the Chiapas region, and throughout his life was in the habit of making long trips to the jungle in the south of Mexico. He studied the language and culture of the Indians there and took thousands of photographs of the people and their lands.
He used to develop the pictures in the jungle because, he wanted to make sure that the pictures had come out. This is part of the equipment. He used to bring water from the spring, and this he took all his equipment in his mules. This helmet you see in many of his pictures. When he first came to Mexico, he kept a diary of what places he visited,